Hello and welcome to part 3 of my Avatars 3.0 tutorials. In this one, I plan on showing the radial control. Now, if you watched part 2, you'll notice that I created this tutorial animation duplicate of my model, and then we didn't actually use it. So I'm going to show why I made this and actually make use of it. But I was asked on Discord to maybe show a radial puppet with a slider in order to change a variable on a sliding scale. So the only thing that I really have on this avatar that can be manipulated by sliders is blend shapes, which are mostly for the facial expressions. So I'm going to do that, and hopefully this at least gives an idea of how that functions. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is create the animation that controls the slider. And for that, this is where the model duplicate comes in. Because when you come in to make a new animation, like if you click animation here, you'll see if you don't already have a controller, it'll ask you to create an animation. So you click create, and it's already in the animations folder. So I'm just going to change the name of this to, I'll just make it left eye. And save. Now, you'll notice up here it added a controller. We don't want a controller in our main avatar. It may be possible to have one there, however, it causes some issues with the other animation systems. And so this one, you'll notice this is still blank, and that's the way we want it. So you'll switch to this one to edit your animations. It also causes some funkiness with body positions and whatnot that you just don't want to happen. So we'll start by adding a property. Now, because this is a blend shape, it's going to be under the skin to mesh render of the body on my particular avatar, and you find the blend shape or shapes that you want to edit or manipulate. And I'm going to use the blink left. So you just hit the plus sign, and that adds it to your properties. You can add as many of these as you want. For the FX layer that we're going to be using, you can only use effects. So nothing that changes the position of the body. But, you know, as many blend shapes as you want is fine. Now I'm going to grab this last keyframe and drag it all the way down, because you want just a one frame animation. And by selecting this, we have 0. If you move to the last keyframe and change this to 100, then you see the value changes from 0 to 100 within one frame. And that's all we have to do for the animation. So when you go back to the project, you'll notice that under animations, I now have left eye animation that we just created and the controller that it added to my tutorial animation model over here. This we will completely ignore at this point. We'll only be using the animation itself. So from here, if we go back to tutorial and click on your FX layer and then click on animator, it's very important that you select FX first, or it will try to use that controller that was automatically created, and that's not what we want. So now when you're creating a new section, a new animation, it's a good idea to use a new layer. And you just hit the plus sign up here, create a new layer. I'll just name it left eye, And don't forget to change the weight of this. If it's 0, it won't actually play. So I set it at 1. I leave everything else as it is, and that seems to work just fine. So now we do just like we did on the previous video, where we create a new empty, and I like to name mine wait, because this is waiting for a new state. And then we create another empty, and we right click on wait and make transition to new state. The new state is going to be our left eye animation, where we find our animation that we just made and drag it in there. And then what you want to do is make sure that normalized time is checked. And it's going to want a parameter, which we have to create. So in our parameters, we need 2 parameters for this. One is an int, which will make eye change. And again, you can name these really whatever you want. I try to make sure that they're somewhat descriptive of what they do. Eye change is basically going to be the state that this is waiting for. Eye radial is basically, if you think about it, as the percentage of the radial that you're using. So in your transition, under conditions, just like we did before, you're going to change, in this case, eye change is our state that we're waiting for. And then under left eye animation, this is eye radial, the other one we set up. Now we want to go into our stage parameters and make these exact same ones, just as before. So we have eye change, and that is an integer, and eye radial. Make sure you spell everything right, and that's a float. Okay, now that we have all of our parameters set up, we go into our main menu, and we're going to add a control and change it to radial puppet. In our, let's call this left eye. And then we select our parameters. Again, the main parameter here is the integer that we set, which is the eye change. And then our parameter rotation is eye radial. Now that should be all we need to do. There is something else to be done here, however, potentially, depending on how you want this to function. If you want to change the eye with the radial, and then when you exit the menu it goes back to normal, then you need to add an additional transition here, just like we did in the previous one, and you change your radial. Oh, wrong one. You change eye change equals 0. And this will exit the menu and reset the animation to nothing. If you want it to hold whatever percentage you set, then you do not add this extra transition. If you leave this transition out, it will hold whatever it is you set. Alright, I will go to build and test and get back into the game and be right back. Alright, so this is done building. Click OK, And then we switch over to the game. Now, as before, we have to reload our avatar every time we upload a new build, or build a new build, I guess. Alright, so we pull up our menu and go to expressions, and now you see there's a left eye option that has a percentage, and that's how the radial puppet works. So when you choose this, you can now scroll from 0 to 100%, and you see her eye is closing and opening that amount. Now, because I did not have the exit transition included, when I exit the menu, it stays with a 75% close, because that's where I left it. And you can come in and change this to whatever you want, and it will stay there. Now, normally that's probably not the most ideal in this particular case, but that's one way of doing it. You can, of course, put that extra transition in, and it will just reset to default as soon as you exit the menu, just like our normal faces, where it resets to nothing when you exit. And that should do it for this tutorial. Thank you for watching, and hope you found this informative.